Hi, Phyllis here again. I thought of another little story you might find interesting. This was about I'm going to guess and say about 1949, maybe 1950. My great-grandfather on my mother's side, his last name was Brown, and he built grist mills. I guess that's what he did for a living, and built the dams and everything that went with those. So on the creek that was between Bensalem Church and Big Oak Church, close to Eagle Springs, North Carolina, he built a grist mill in, I'm going to guess and say, around the turn of the century. And this mill had a large pond there. It also had an earthen dam and wood at the top part of it. I'm not sure how they built that, but anyway, the pond was a fairly large pond, and the grist mill itself was about 3 stories tall, and it also had a little store that went with it, and my grandfather used to run that little store. And anyway, many years later, my grandfather, of course, retired, and they moved to some land that he had inherited from his mother, which was a mile or so away. And so anyway, the mill, the person running the mill, used to get those little white ducks. I don't know what the reason was, but they'd always have maybe 4 or 5 ducks swimming around on the pond. It was very pretty, and a lot of old growth forest around the pond. So his ducks, something was killing the ducks. So they would find, places where there were feathers, something had gotten the ducks, and they didn't know what was killing all the ducks. So he kept replacing the ducks, and something kept killing the ducks. So finally, they discovered that the culprit was a very large snapping turtle. And he would go over on the opposite bank of the pond where no one could really get to him, and that's where he would sun himself every day. So one day while he was sunning himself, a couple of the men that were down at the store came to get my daddy, and he had a high-powered rifle with a scope on it. So they came to get him because they knew he had that rifle, and so he loaded the rifle in the car and let me go with him. I mean, I was always interested in what Daddy was doing, so anytime I got to go, I would go. So he let me come, and so we pulled into the mill pond store area where they had the little, parking lot, and then we drove on back to where the mill pond was. And there were several men by this time standing around, and the turtle was, sure enough, way over on the far bank sunning himself. Now, I was very young, but I could see that turtle, and he was huge. He looked more like a sea turtle, really. He was that big. And I'm going to guess and say maybe the shell was 20, maybe 24 inches around, just huge. So he's over there sunning himself, and by this time there are only 2 ducks left. And they're on the other bank, obviously, away from the turtle. So anyway, my daddy got the rifle out and got the scope situated, and he shot the turtle while he was sunning himself. He shot him, the shell would have been up here, and he shot him right in there. Can you see? Right in there in the neck, and of course killed him. So several of the young men that were standing around dove in the water, and they, of course, the one shot had killed the turtle. So they swam over and floated the turtle back over to the other bank where we all were, so we could see it. He was really scary looking. He was just huge. So anyway, that's the story of how my daddy killed the turtle that was killing all the ducks. And but after that, people didn't really like to swim in that pond, and before that, people were always down there swimming. But they kind of stopped swimming there because they didn't know if maybe there were other turtles there, that were that big, because this one was really scary looking. So anyway, that was my little story on the very large, I guess it was a snapping turtle. I remember looking at it, and I was afraid of it. Even though it was dead, I was afraid of it. But anyway, so my daddy was the hero that day, and he killed the turtle. And I mean, the reason they killed it was because nobody could ever catch it, because by the time they would get in the boat to go over there to get him, about the time they'd approach, he would go back in the water. So there was nothing to do but kill the turtle if they wanted the ducks to remain, and if people could swim there safely, because he was so big. So anyway, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it.